welcome back to Franklin Covey's twice weekly podcast on leadership with Scott Miller. That's me. I have the privilege of sitting in this chair on the stool on Tuesdays and Fridays interviewing many of the world's most profound luminaries, authors, artists, scientists, researchers, teachers, academics, creators, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, oftentimes leaders inside organizations where we have had the privilege for 6 years and now 400 episodes to shine what is Franklin Covey's mega bright spotlight onto people that share similar values and similar interest in making you a better leader, whether that is a leader at work, in your business, or at home, in your personal life. Franklin Covey's mission is to inspire greatness in people and organizations everywhere. Our co-founder, of course, was Stephen R. Covey, who wrote the seminal book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, that has changed literally hundreds of millions of lives, and mine slightly, according to my wife. And so I'm so honored to be associated with this brand. And today, in fact, is the 400th episode of Franklin Covey's On Leadership podcast. And with a little bit of cajoling and convincing, I have lured, if you will, Franklin Covey's president and CEO, Paul Walker, to come today to talk specifically about the impact that the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People has had on him, on colleagues inside the company, and countless millions of clients around the world. So it's with great honor that Paul Walker is joining us today. Paul, welcome to On Leadership.
Thanks, Scott. Glad to be here.
First time in 6 years, 400 episodes.
I've been dodging you.
Yeah, you have been dodging me. That's not true, actually. It was our idea to invite you to come back to what is the 400th episode. Every couple of years, we hit a milestone, and we invite a seminal thought leader, and then there's you. We've invited to come. We're delighted you're here because soon, Franklin Covey is going to be re-releasing a new iteration of what is one of our many seminal leadership offerings, the 7 Habits. And today, it's all things Dr. Covey, 7 Habits, Franklin Covey today.
Perfect.
What I would love to do, because you are very deliberately not an author, at least not yet, you keep resisting my overtures to lure you into authorship. Who knows, maybe someday. So far, you have proved resilient. I want to talk a little bit about your career, because you've had a remarkable career, almost exclusively, not solely, inside the Franklin Covey company, from the front line, literally to the C-suite. Would you rewind for a couple of decades and a couple of minutes and maybe reintroduce yourself to all of our listeners and viewers worldwide?
Yeah, thank you. This month is my 25th anniversary.
Congrats.
At the firm. It's the most incredible place to work and to have found a way to make a career here. It's just been wonderful. And I've had a great opportunity to do a lot of different jobs in the company, work with a lot of different people. And one of the great things about working here, of course, is just seeing the impact of what we do ripple out from this firm out into the world for so many years. It's been wonderful.
I think it's a cliche that the cobbler's kid has no shoes, right? But at Franklin Covey, I think it's different. I think we really try our best to model what we teach and what we offer clients. I think if you're a colleague in the world at Franklin Covey, you had a chance to attend many of our offerings, read our books, including the 7 Habits. I think one of our orientation investments is to make sure everybody has experience with the 7 Habits. And it might be a cliche also to say that aren't the 7 Habits as relevant now as they were when Dr. Covey wrote the book nearly 40 years ago and launched the related leadership program. Talk about, in your mind, how relevant you think those principles are. We'll walk through them in a minute, as much today as they were nearly 4 decades ago.
Yeah, it's a great point. And sometimes people will say that. They'll say, hey, it's been 35, nearly 40 years now. Are the habits as relevant today as they were when Stephen first penned them or first collated them together and discovered them? And our answer is unequivocally yes. In fact, Stephen used to say, and we still say and really do believe, that the greater the challenges, the greater the change, the greater the disruption, the more important the habits become. And I think if we think about where we are today in 2024, the word unprecedented is a big word, but I think it applies to unprecedented levels of change, access to information, the size that companies have become, the level of diversity that we all live in now, which is a great thing. Like, there's just been a lot of change, and it comes at us more and more rapidly. And yet here are these 7 habits that are principle-based. They're universal in their application. They're universal in their applicability. They cross cultures. They transcend generations, because these habits, which we'll talk about in a minute, they are the principles upon which people can build to have a truly effective and remarkable life. And so, yeah, they're every bit as relevant today as they've ever been, if not, maybe even more.
Speaking of universal, they're universal in their frustration because I'm constantly being humbled by them.
They are.
Let's talk about those.
Okay.
So, time to stump the chump, if you will. I'm going to feed you the habit. I know that they're not just habits.
Because you don't think I know the habits.
Well, because I might not. Because that would be embarrassing after nearly 30 years here as well.
Right.
Okay, so let's talk. I'm going to pitch you the habit just to level set the conversation. Sure. And you can maybe give me a thought, a phrase, a couple of sentences on what it means to you. Okay. Habit 1, obviously, is be proactive. It is the habit of personal vision.
Habit 1, I'm responsible for my life. I'm responsible for the decisions that I make. And that's a very empowering and helpful thing for me to have that as a mindset. I'm in charge of my life, and I get to decide what I do with my life.
I think a lot of people think of this as necessarily being proactive, taking charge, taking initiative, but it's as much that as it is about managing your emotions and not being reactive to outside stimuli.
Yeah, in fact, when Stephen wrote the book, 35 years ago, the word proactive wasn't even necessarily a word that was common in the English language. We didn't use that a lot. And now, of course, people use the word proactive all the time, but they do mean, today we kind of mean something slightly different than what Stephen, I think, was trying to capture in his use of the word. And the idea was that actually what proactive people do is they learn how to put a little bit of space between the stimulus that they're feeling, whether it's good or challenging stimulus. They put a little space between that and how they react to that. And in that space, there's the opportunity for us to choose our response. And boy, that is a powerful, powerful idea.
Oh, now you tell me.
Yeah, well.
This would have been helpful 30 years ago when I started at FranklinCovey.
Remember, it's a journey.
Oh, wait, it's true. Okay, habit 2, begin with the end in mind.
Yeah.
It's the habit of personal leadership.
Yeah. This is, beginning with the end in mind is my opportunity to think about creating the vision for my life. Where do I want my life to go? Or where do I want my team to go if I'm in a work setting? What are we trying to accomplish? And getting so clear about that, so clear about the destination and what the journey between where we are today and where we want to be, that we could actually take action on it, which is going to lead to habit 3.
I think Dr. Covey, amongst many contributions, is probably one of the most quoted thought leaders of our lifetime. I remember in this habit, he taught this idea of measure twice and cut once.
Yeah.
This is something I'm trying to teach to my 3 sons and also be a model of. Habit 3, put first things first. The habit, if you will, of personal management.
Yeah. So if I've thought about where I'm trying to go with my life or where our team is trying to go and what we're trying to accomplish, now it's time to put that plan into action. And it is the habit of personal management. What are the actions that I take? It's called first things first for a reason. Depending on the destination I've picked, the things that I might need to do could look very different if my destination is here versus there. And so it's getting clear then on what are the first things in my life that are going to get me where I'm trying to go. And it's about aligning my goals and my values and spending my time consistent with those goals and values and consistent with the key roles that I play in my life.
Paul, there's a common assumption that Dr. Covey invented these habits, but the fact is he researched them, he curated them, he named them, he sequenced them, he organized them. He didn't invent these principles, these are principles. But he did a great job, did he not, of organizing them into what's called the private and public victory. Talk about that as we move on to habits 4 through 7.
Yeah, great, thank you. So the word that I love that he used when he would talk about discovering these, he used the word detected. He detected these habits. And a little known story, before the book was written, he'd been out teaching the 7 habits a lot. So go back 40 years ago, the book was written about 35 years ago. And after having spent a lot of time, he recognized actually the order of these habits makes a really big difference. And it was the sequential nature of the habits themselves, the way that you started here and they built on each other. And the framework of the 7 habits is designed to move somebody from a state of dependence to independence to ultimately the highest form, which is interdependence. And so these first 3 habits we've talked about help someone move from that state of dependence to independence. You've mastered yourself. And that's so important before you can then move outward and start to improve and impact your relationships with other people. It's very difficult to improve the quality of your relationships if you haven't started with a strong core personal foundation first.
Did my wife send you today?
She may have sent me a text. Yeah.
So habits 1 through 3 is what Dr. Covey called the private victory, mastery with self, if you will. Yep. And then the public victory, habits 4, 5, and 6. Habit 4, think win-win, which is the habit or principle of interpersonal leadership. Expand on that.
Yeah. So win-win is this idea of mutual benefit, that it's learning to operate and live your life with an abundance mentality, that there's more than enough to go around. And when I have that mindset, that the pie is not fixed. Because I get a bigger piece of pie, you therefore get a smaller piece of pie, but actually the pie can expand. Our ability then to come together and really think win-win goes up exponentially. And the way that we can problem solve and come up with new ideas is exponentially better when we approach things trying to figure out, I know what my win is, but if I knew what your win was, together we could win together.
Probably one of the most broadly quoted habits you see around the world.
Now that's an example of a word that he kind of brought to the fore, and now it's very common.
Yeah, popularized a lot of those words. Habit 5, seek first to understand, then to be understood. That's a chapter I skipped over in the book, apparently.
Yeah, it's a hard one.
The principle is of empathic communication.
Yeah. It's, I think, human nature to listen to someone with the intent to respond.
Yeah.
Right? I'm so fixated on what I'm going to say next to what you just said.
Or you want to solve their problem or help them out.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. Yeah. But what Stephen was trying to do is say, hey, there's a whole nother level of communication. It's empathic communication. And it starts when you as the listener has so deeply not only heard but understood what was being said and understood the person who was saying it, that you go to a whole new level in your ability to communicate.
Scale of 1 to 10, high is 10, 1 is low. How would you rank yourself on being proactive?
Pretty high.
7, 8, 9?
Yeah, 7, between 7 or 8 or 9. Yeah.
Begin with the end in mind.
7, same, similar.
Put first things first.
I know where you're going. Yeah, pretty high on put first things first. I love a good to-do list.
Think win-win.
Yeah, I think people say not too bad.
Habit 5,
yeah, really bad.
Yeah. And Dr. Covey as well. He often would say this was his hardest habit, right?
Yeah. I made a huge mistake early in about 15 years ago. I was working for the company. We were living in Chicago at the time, and we were putting on a public session of 7 habits, and we invited people. It was a little bit of a benefit as well, and we told some of the associates working out there at the time, hey, why don't you invite a friend or a colleague or a partner to come? And I thought, this would be great. I'm going to invite my wife, Melissa, to go to the 7 habits on her own. And so I sent her, she went for 3 days to the 7 habits. It was the worst decision because she now understood how far the gap was between my living habit 5 and what was possible.
Do not bring the 7 habits into your house.
That's not the story, but that was the story in that moment.
Yeah, well, I know your wife, and your wife's highly educated, so she knew that prior to going to the 7 habits.
Yeah.
Okay, habit 6, synergize, the principal habit of creative cooperation.
Yeah, that's what it is, right? Is that if I'm thinking win-win, I'm able to understand at an empathic level what somebody else needs or how they're doing. Our ability now to come together, and if we can both do that, our ability to come together, synergy is really the output. It's the manifestation of the other habits. It's the culmination of living really habits 1 through 5. It's a powerful principle. We teach the Leader in Me, or we teach 7 habits in a program called the Leader in Me to elementary, middle, and high school students. And when you go into their classrooms and you say, hey, which habit are you most excited about and you're most working on, they will often say synergize or synergy, and they talk about how they're incorporating that into the playground and things they're doing out there. It's how we become better teammates with each other.
Quick sidebar, because I think people will be interested. FranklinCovey has had a remarkable investment and great partnership around the world, taking the 7 habits and applying it with students and educators and administrators. Talk for just a moment about the breadth of that investment and the impact it's having around the world.
Yeah, so boy, we became aware of a school in Raleigh, North Carolina, more than a decade ago, that was in trouble. They were a magnet school that was about to be demagnetized. They were struggling, and the principal of that school, her name is Muriel Summers. She had gone to hear Dr. Covey speak, and he was speaking to a group of adults and business leaders in the area, and she went up to him after and said, Dr. Covey, would it be possible for these habits to be taken into a school and to be taught to students as young as even kindergarten or 1st or 2nd grade? And he said, I don't see why not. And so Muriel set about, and then we came in after and helped continue to codify what she had built, but we took the 7 habits and adapted them for elementary, middle, high school students. And now in more than 7,000 schools around the world, the 7 habits are being taught in a program called The Leader in Me, where we're partnering with teachers and administrators to teach leadership skills, personal leadership skills to students. It's amazing what's happening in these schools.
It's like inspiringly contagious.
You would want to go spend hours in these schools because it feels so different.
And many of these schools are having civic investment, business investment to create the future workforce.
And companies are paying attention because they're saying, hey, those are the kind of graduates and students we want in our workforce. We want people that can live these habits.
Let's land the plane.
Okay.
Habit 7, sharpen the saw. the habit or principle of balanced self-renewal.
Yeah. Yeah, this is important. It's always been important. But the 7 habits framework, when we draw the framework, habit 7 is the circle that surrounds everything. And it's this idea that in order to continue to better yourself and practice the 6 habits, you need this opportunity for self-renewal and this opportunity to recharge your batteries and stay balanced in your life. And I think this is one of those habits that is particularly relevant today. It's difficult today. We're being pulled and pushed and shoved in a lot of different directions. There's into the pandemic, out of the pandemic, remote work, hybrid work, sitting in front of a computer all day. We're on our smartphones more and more. People feel isolated. People feel stressed. And yet Dr. Covey was saying, look, those may not have all been the conditions when he wrote the book, but certainly the conditions today. And I think this idea of self-renewal, how do I take care of myself and make sure that I show up as my best self every day and in every relationship is what Habit 7 is all about.
Paul, early in your and my career here, we had the privilege of working with Dr. Covey on a variety of projects and with clients and seeing him speak. And we know him to be one of the most quoted people in our history, right? I mean, so many great quotes. Be a light, not a judge.
Yeah.
Be a model, not a critic. As the CEO of FranklinCovey, the standard's high for you because you're supposed to be the ambassador of all the contents we teach. Yeah. How many different solutions does FranklinCovey offer?
About 26
Yeah, so you have a PhD in everything from execution to project management or president. But the standard's high.
It's a good thing we're a pre-forgiveness culture.
This is true for all of us, me as well. But I think you do an excellent job of striving and apologizing and picking up and moving forward. You've had 25 years with this content. Tell me, maybe on a personal level, what's been the biggest transformation in you, Paul Walker, the human being? Not necessarily as a leader yet, but you as a person. What's been the biggest improvement in your life?
That's a great question, and I will say, and I said this a little bit when we first sat down, that one of the great benefits of being associated with this company and this content for so long is it can't help but kind of seep in all aspects of your life. And there's no question, well, maybe there is a question in the lives of my wife and my kids, but I think I'm a better dad, I'm a better partner, I'm a better, hopefully, boss, leader, colleague at work because of the 7 habits. There have been so many things along the way. I've had the chance to read and reread the 7 habits over time, and each time you pick up a different thing. I think early in my career, getting the balance right between courage and consideration. Stephen talked a lot about that in the 7 habits. That's a tough balance, but it's an important balance.
Because early in life, did you have an excess of one or the other?
Yeah, I felt I was more considerate, and I felt like maybe being courageous, especially in relationships or in sharing what needed to be shared, that was somehow mean-spirited. I don't know where I developed that, but that was maybe the paradigm that I had. And so, whether it was that or learning how to really communicate more empathically, that's been so helpful in so many relationships. My 4 kids are 23 down to 15. Like, there's a huge opportunity for empathic listening as you're guiding people through that phase of your life, people that you love dearly. And I really do love those kids. So many things along the way.
We share that in common. I can't have a conversation with one of our 3 boys without the 7 habits haunting me. Yeah. Am I asking the right questions? Am I listening empathically? Am I trying to, push my own agenda? Am I interrupting? It can be crippling, but hopefully my boys as well will be the beneficiary.
I had the most gratifying experience about 6 months ago. So I've tried to get my kids to do stuff with the 7 habits, right? It seems like the thing to do. And we go to company things, and I'm like, hey, there's Sean Covey over there. That's Stephen's son, and he wrote the 7 Habits Teens. And my daughter, who's 21, sent me an email and said, Dad, hey, could you get me a copy of the 7 Habits? I think I could benefit from reading that book. And I was like, yes, finally, I've got a kid leaning in here. So I'm excited for what's happening in their lives related to this content as well.
Paul, it's common to have a CEO, a founder, a leader, a celebrity, a board member, a politician for that matter, call you, talk to us in the company about how the 7 habits impacted their life. We were just on a call a couple of hours or a couple of days ago with a global CEO that talked about the impact the 7 habits had on their life. And we hear it frequently, and everyone is like the first time because it's so validating. Why do you think, which is a treasure, why do you think there is such a correlation between the number of leaders sitting in significant board seats on foundations, at the helm of organizations, and their success in so many of them, NFL players, NBA players, that will say extemporaneously, well, can I tell you, I read a book once, and then we almost can predict what they're going to say. check your humility as the steward of this brand.
Yeah.
Ultimately, why is there such a strong correlation between success in life and a connection usually early on in the 7 Habits?
Yeah. In this, every few years you go and refresh and republish the book. And a few years ago when we did that with the 7 Habits, we were fortunate. Jim Collins, the great author and thinker,
Good to Great, Built to
Last. He offered to pen the foreword to the 7 Habits for the most recent version, and he wrote something in that foreword that I think is just genius, and it's so true. He talked about what Bill Gates and others did in the early computing era to create the operating system that makes computers now, the modern day computer, so accessible and so easy and so powerful. Right? Before the operating system, it was the average person couldn't access much of the computing power. And he compared what those individuals did for modern day computers to what Stephen did for human effectiveness. And he said what Stephen really did is he created the framework, the interface, the user interface, if you will, for how to become a truly effective human being. And I think that's it. And so when you talk to these people, whether they've risen to be great leaders in organizations, or they're great leaders in their community, or they're great leaders in their home or in a school, they're great individuals. They've learned how to really lead themselves effectively, and I think that's what Stephen was about, was giving people a simple but profound set of habits to work on over the course of your life. And it is a journey over the course of your life, but as you get better and better at these, you do become a better, more effective human being.
You do. Partner, collaborator, team member.
Yeah, there's no question. And so therefore I think the correlation is high. People that rise to those levels need to be effective, and the 7 Habits was their prescription, their guidebook for doing that.
So over the last almost 4 decades, 50+ million people have bought the book, read it, given it to their kids or spouses or whoever. And then FranklinCovey developed an actual organizational solution around it, right? Some years it was a multi-day offering. Some years it was online, self-paced, hybrid. I mean, now anybody can access the 7 Habits in any way their organization best deems them to have access to it. I'd love to have you talk about, from an organizational level, when a leader makes the investment for her team or his team, and everybody attends a 7 Habits experience, regardless of what the actual mechanics look like. Someone emerges looking, feeling, operating like what? What's the difference? They come in like what, and they leave how?
Yeah. This was the reason for taking the 7 Habits and then building an organization around it. The organization today is known as FranklinCovey, but it was to go and help, and we chose intentionally corporations. We said we could go help corporations and now schools benefit from the 7 Habits, because what every organization has in common is organizations are trying to produce a result. They're trying to serve their customers, produce a result for their shareholders, for all of their stakeholders, and therefore you have a group of people that need to get aligned. They need to learn how to work well together. They need to be inspired. They need to be able to communicate and collaborate, have high degrees of interpersonal effectiveness. If you don't have that, it's hard to get lots of people to come together and go where you're trying to go as an organization. And so companies and schools for decades have flocked to the 7 Habits. Millions of them, as you said in your opening, not just millions of people, millions of companies have participated in 7 Habits.
For-profit, not-for-profit, municipal, you name it.
And in every country you could possibly imagine. It's available in every language. And they want to deploy the 7 Habits because there are a number of outcomes. People themselves feel more connected to the company. They feel more empowered. They feel more inspiration. They feel like they're more in control of their career and how they can contribute at work. The quality of the interactions between people and between teams goes way up. There starts to be a common language spoken in the organization. The ability to adapt, to change, and get things done and move at pace grows exponentially as people come, and they're just better at being human and better at working together.
Across all the engagements you've been involved in, intimately or peripherally, I know that companies have used it for their onboarding program, or for orientation, or for leadership pipeline, team dynamics, whatever it is. Yeah. Perhaps there was a merger or acquisition and they wanted to get people on the same page or culture. Does there generally tend to be a set of pretty common circumstances that an organization is in? It could be a town council, right? It could be a school board group. In your mind, are there 4 or 5 or 3 or 4 circumstances you find this usually is when our clients have the biggest impact on making an investment in the 7 Habits?
Yeah, and you name some of the circumstances they're in, whether it's we're onboarding a bunch of new employees or we've merged. But I would say that the underlying things that they're trying to address is they're trying to create common culture, common language, common way of working and relating to each other. I mean, at the end of the day, even as AI and everything else comes in and our lives become more digital, life is still a human endeavor. It's a
especially
human
with more
experience.
diverse populations and companies now.
Absolutely. And to get work done, whether it's in a classroom or it's in a corporation, people need to come together. They need to get on the same page. They need to know that they have each other's backs. They need to be able to work through issues. They need to be able to think win-win. Some of these habits we talked about are so important. People need to know how to prioritize their day and their life and go home, come to work and go home feeling fulfilled so that they can go and take care of the things in their personal life as well. And the 7 Habits just becomes this great investment and framework that not only helps the company, but it helps the individuals as well. It's like when you're doing good for your people, you're also doing good for your company at the same time. It's really a unique solution that way.
You mentioned the phrase common culture and common language. I think that's where I would put the most stock is when you have an organization now that perhaps is growing. We have people that are perhaps coming to the office a couple of days a week or not at all, or different cities. Increasingly the case, right?
Yeah.
With a new generation of workers with different values and different needs and aspirations. Common language is so helpful when you have engineers with this background or perhaps people with this different cultural background. Talk about what the 7 Habits does to build a language that helps people to increase productivity, to extend trust, and build a culture where they don't just choose to stay, but they choose to perhaps refer their high-performing friends and colleagues in.
Yeah, you know, I think the language piece is so important. So imagine you and I are both familiar with 7 Habits. Imagine we work in the same company, and I need to have, you're my boss, and I work for you, but I need to have a courageous conversation. And I come in the room and I say, Scott, I need to talk to you about something. And could you just practice habit 5 for a minute? You know what that means. And immediately you move into, okay, you know what? I'm going to empathically listen. I'm going to listen to understand because Paul is going to do something that might be difficult for him. He's going to have a courageous conversation. You're my boss. And so, you know, that's an example. Or bringing the team together and saying, you know, I'm not sure we all share the same end in mind here. Like, we're going to devote this meeting to make sure that when we leave, we're all clear on what is our end in mind as a team, or what is our end in mind for the way we want to work together? What's our end in mind strategically? And these become shorthand. They become cultural shorthands. We use things like that in our lives all the time, these shortcuts that convey tremendous amount of meaning and depth in just a few short words. And the benefits that accrue to an organization when you reach a tipping point and people collectively now understand these habits, they understand the principles that sit underneath them, they're able to apply them. You know, we're all learning and growing and progressing, but they apply them, you know, generally. It really becomes a huge accelerator for teams and organizations.
And I also think it also raises the standard, does it not? Because once everyone's been through the same experience, you know when someone is gossiping, you know when someone is not putting first things first, or for that matter, perhaps their life's out of balance, and you want to say, hey, listen, you should sharpen the saw.
100%.
40 years, I don't think a word has changed in this book, maybe like a period or a comma.
Yeah.
But the offering has changed pretty substantially. About every 5-7 years or so, the company goes through a whole reiteration process, all kinds of changes in the experience that an employer will invest in for their colleagues. FranklinCovey's on the cusp of what is it, the 5th iteration?
The 5th
iteration. Yep. The book has stayed the same. The principles are the same, but the experience evolves as the world evolves, as needs evolve. Talk as much as you'd like around what's coming out from FranklinCovey, the 5th iteration of the 7 Habits. What will current clients, former clients who may want to come back, and perhaps future clients, what will they experience with the new 7 Habits?
Yeah, that's great. So first of all, just stepping back, we have this tremendous stewardship at FranklinCovey to honor and take care of some of these great legacy brands. And the 7 Habits is a tremendous legacy brand. I think it's confidently say it's sold more books and instances of training, and there's been more usage of that than probably anything else in this space ever. And so here we are today, nearly 40 years later, and we're charged with keeping this not just fresh, but refreshed, and to take it further into the world and to get it to more people. And the good news is that every year more people are getting exposure to this than they did the previous year. In a way, and we're not Disney, we're a teeny tiny fraction of the size of a company like Disney, but you think about what they're doing, what they've been able to do. They've been able to take these rich legacy brands that we've all grown up with, and they continue to reinvest and refresh them, and they find ways to extend those brands, right? And Mickey Mouse is as relevant today as Mickey Mouse was when Walt Disney first penned him because of what Disney's done. In much the same way, that's our charge in that charter. And then, of course, we invent lots of new solutions on new topics as well every year. But related to the 7 Habits, it is the 5.0 version. This is the 5th iteration going in, like you said, every 7 or 8 years. We spend millions of dollars, and we look at everything. We don't touch Stephen's work because the principles are timeless.
The habits
and enduring.
don't change.
The habits don't change. But we do look at everything else. How can we better tell that story? How can we tell the story or make that habit or that principle come alive in 2024? Because that's different than the way you might have had it come alive, in 2018. And so we'll reshoot every video, we'll retell every story, we'll rethink every exercise. We'll think about the modalities through which we deliver. You rattled off a number of modalities earlier. Today, the 7 Habits can be accessed on your phone, via Zoom, by yourself, with your family, in your school, in your corporation. It can be modular over time. It can be, everybody come into a room and do it together. Almost any way you could think of to configure and seamlessly deploy that. Because remember, what we're trying to do is help organizations get this not to a small percentage of their population, but to the entire organization, because that's when you reach this cultural tipping point. And so lots of format changes, lots of new exercises, videos. It's really been completely redesigned from the ground up with the modern worker, the people that are coming into the workforce today, the way they're accustomed to learning, the way they're accustomed to gaining access to this information, the way they want to go through it and experience and then apply it back into their own lives.
And also see themselves in it, right? I think you put a lot of energy and thoughtfulness. You have clients that opine and other thought leaders to say, does this experience or circumstance represent a broad population from different industries and with different goals?
Yeah, and we think a lot about one of the big deployment methods is through what we call client facilitators. So not only do we have people that work for us that go teach this to organizations, and you as an individual could go through it yourself, or you could read the book as well, but there are tens of thousands of people who have been certified to teach the 7 Habits into their organizations. They're the experts in their company helping, cascade this throughout their organizations. And the point you mentioned of seeing yourself in it, this is extremely applicable and relevant to people in their personal and their work lives. It's like one of the things that just grabs you and pulls you in because it's so darn relevant.
Of different generations, ethnicities, backgrounds, countries, and cultures. I think that's one of FranklinCovey's most valuable value propositions to organizations is you're everywhere. I mean, FranklinCovey has a large global footprint. Talk a little bit about the size and breadth and scope of all of your partnerships around the world.
Yeah, so we take this content throughout the world through a combination of our own direct brick and mortar locations in about 15 countries, and then we have a very vast partner network, licensee partners. We don't think of them that way. We think of them as our partners, but they represent us to their clients and our clients around the world. There are 50 or 60 of them, and they cover about 130 or 140 countries beyond the 15 or so that we have a direct presence in, so that the 7 Habits is being taught and deployed literally everywhere in the world, every day of the week, either through us or through our partners or through a certified facilitator. It's an inspiring thing to think about.
I mean, it's a great legacy that you and 1,000+ FranklinCovey associates around the world shepherd every day. Our founders, Hiram Smith, who is credited with sort of being the vision behind the Franklin Planner and the methodology that millions of people still use to this day, although the Franklin Planning tool isn't part of the firm. The time management productivity principles permeate all of our lives, no matter what we're using as a tool. And then, of course, Dr. Covey, both of which have passed in the last decade or so. FranklinCovey's done something special, and that is oftentimes when you have a figurehead or a guru that passes, the brand not just atrophies, but often disappears. You see it, with lots of seminal thought leaders. FranklinCovey has almost doubled in size, in reach, in revenue, and impact since the passing of the founders, not because of, but maybe in spite of. Is there anything that the company has done that might be inspiring to other founders, other company owners, or CEOs that are thinking about their legacy, their longevity, the impact that their organization can have beyond their own legacy that FranklinCovey did that a lot of others in the space weren't able to accomplish.
Yeah, and I don't know how unique these things are, but very intentional. An organization was built. I think that's the bottom line, is that an organization was built expressly to continue to take these concepts and these principles to the world. And I think what's allowed the 7 Habits, of course, it's relevant because of its principle-based nature, but what the company's done well, and I don't take credit for this, it was people before me that really built this up, is that we said, as long as we're the partner to leaders to help them achieve what they've been put in charge to achieve inside their organizations, if we could help them in those most critical and challenging areas that they face, how do you equip everybody in the company to show up and be very productive every day? How do you get culture right? How do you create the conditions for leaders to lead at the highest level possible? How do you get everybody pointed in the right direction, moving in the right direction? That would make FranklinCovey the firm really valuable, and as long to leaders. And as long as FranklinCovey the firm is valuable, then by extension, all of these great brands that we have inside the firm are going to be very valuable as well. And so we have both this brand focus, like the 7 Habits, and then the mission of the firm is to be a partner to leaders to help them achieve the results that they're so interested in achieving. And I think you have this dual thing going on that's really helped keep these powerful brands going.
Let's conclude by getting a bit personal. I know you have reread 7 Habits, the book, probably many times over the course of your association with it. Is there a particular insight, a story, a habit that you maybe discovered on a subsequent reading? Or as of late, as you have been rolling up your sleeves literally in the relaunch and redesign of the work session that people around the world will test and experience and implement, is there something that maybe you've revisited that has had, if not a profound impact, a measurable impact enough on you as a spouse, a parent, a person, a leader, that you might be vulnerable enough to share?
Yeah. I have been through the 7 Habits, both the training program and the book, many times, you might imagine. And I think what's interesting about a work like this
Yet you still struggle.
I know. We'll talk about that offline. Do you have a couch I can lay on? But I think that each time you go through it or you experience it, you're doing so in a little bit of a different part of your life, or the circumstances have changed. Maybe your role in the company is different, or things are different at home, or things are different in a key relationship. And so you come at it from a slightly different angle, and therefore different things stand out at different times. And I think that's what makes the 7 Habits like an ongoing life exploration and journey, and why you can reread the book over and over again, and in many ways it feels new each time you read it. Most recently, in preparation for this launch and thinking about what we wanted to do to redesign it, what struck me most was Habit 2, and begin with the end in mind. And I think as I've reflected on that, I think I became the CEO at FranklinCovey 3 years ago, just like last week. And that was a big change in role. And my job now is more about than ever in my career, looking out into the future and trying to figure out where should we be going, and what is that end in mind that would be at the intersection of great for our clients, great for our associates, great for our investors. And I think in previous roles I've thought about that, but not from the current position that I sit. And I just was reminded once again, it's a simple phrase, begin with the end in mind. It is an extremely powerful concept to get so clear and so convicted about where you want to go that you can then bring others along on that journey. A journey that, of course, is going to be filled with twists and turns like all journeys are. But begin with the end in mind has been probably the one that settled in on me most of late.
You were a little resistant to come on today because you gave me all kinds of names of people, of books that you had read that you thought would make better guests, and hopefully there'll be some more podcasts in the future.
And I was probably right.
Whether I'm the host or not is your decision, but I'd love to end this way. As you and the team have been innovating this new solution that will be rolled out around the world into different languages and opportunities, and there's really endless ways that clients can implement the concepts into their organizations to help them achieve their own great purposes. As you've looked at all the exercises and the videos and the experiences, does anything stand out that you'd like to give a sneak peek on or share what you're excited about in terms of what the new offering looks like? Or is it like embargoed and mum's the word?
No, I will tell you, there are, one of the things we're known for, and we win awards for this, is the quality of the videos and the way that we're able to tell a story in a video that really captures the essence of the habit, the principle, and for people to really, like Stephen talked about, that when your paradigm changes, the way you see the world changes on a particular topic, that's what opens the door to being able for you to make meaningful behavior change, which drives a meaningful different result. And so we're all about trying to help people have these ahas, these paradigm shifts, and we do that a lot through video. There are some amazing videos in this new offering.
I can see your excitement.
You would
about
want to go home and show them to your boys.
Yeah. Well, explain that a little bit more.
Yeah.
So when you say there's videos, just talk about how someone experiences those. What is it? If say there's a manager right now or a leader that wants to say, "Hey, let's get this into our organization."
Yeah.
What does that experience look like?
Yeah. So you would bring your team together, or a group of a cohort of managers, or a cohort of associates, or it could be a new employee onbording thing, and
or it could be enterprise-wide.
It could be enterprise-wide, and you might bring 15 or 20 people together, either virtually, spaced out over time, or virtually for a couple of days condensed, or you might invite us to come into your organization and do something in a room. Wow, people actually getting together the old-fashioned way. And over the course of a couple of days, we would go on an exploration. There would be a facilitator leading discussions through each of the habits, and it's both discussion, we'll introduce a habit or a principle with a video. There's a chance at your table to debrief, like, what did we just experience there? What's the aha I'm having? And you start to have discussions around that. There are some participant materials where people are capturing ideas. There's planning documents where you're saying, okay, if that is my end in mind, how would I capture that in a statement? We call that a mission statement. I'm going to leave having written my personal mission statement as a part of this 2 days. And if that's my mission statement, well, what would my day and week look like, and how would that change? And I'm starting to think about habit 3 and making changes in where I spend my time. And so you come out the end of that, whether it's 2 consecutive days or spaced over time, having experienced the 7 habits. And so the example of video is just a way to bring some of these principles to life, where it gets people to lean in and then kind of sit back and say, I hadn't thought about that way. And now that I have thought about it that way, I'm going to think differently about what I might go do next.
Yeah. Paul Walker, 7 Habits Model Extraordinaire, also known as CEO, FranklinCovey.
Thanks
for coming on today. Appreciate you.
Okay.
And we'll see you back here next week for a new conversation on leadership.